I've always been wary of the woods. They loom just beyond the edge of our property, a dark and tangled mass of trees and undergrowth. As a child, I was warned repeatedly to stay away. My parents, the neighbors, even the local school teacher, all of them spoke in hushed tones about the dangers that lay hidden within those shadowy depths. There were stories, of course. Every small town has its legends, and ours were no different. Whispers of disappearances, sightings of strange creatures, and the occasional report of eerie, disembodied voices. All of it was enough to keep me at a safe distance. But as I grew older, my fear of the woods became tinged with something else: curiosity. I'd find myself standing at the edge of the tree line, peering into the darkness, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever might be lurking just out of sight. It was always the same: an impenetrable wall of shadows, the occasional rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird. Nothing that seemed immediately threatening, but enough to send a shiver down my spine. It was on one of those quiet, contemplative afternoons that I decided to venture a little further. Just a few steps into the forest, I told myself, just to see if the air felt different, if the sounds were more ominous. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and stepped into the undergrowth. At first, nothing seemed amiss. The ground was soft and damp underfoot, the air cooler and filled with the scent of earth and pine. I walked slowly, carefully, my senses heightened, listening for any sound out of the ordinary. The deeper I went, the quieter it became. The birdsong faded, replaced by the soft rustling of leaves and the occasional creak of branches. As I moved further into the woods, a sense of unease began to settle over me. It was subtle at first, a prickling at the back of my neck, a feeling of being watched. I paused, looking around, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Still, the feeling persisted. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just nerves, just my imagination playing tricks on me. I continued on, trying to ignore the growing tension in my chest. The woods seemed to close in around me, the trees thicker, their branches intertwining overhead to form a dense canopy that blocked out the sun. The light grew dimmer, the shadows deeper. I could hear my own breathing, the crunch of leaves under my boots, the occasional snap of a twig. Then I saw it, just a flicker at the edge of my vision, something moving between the trees. I turned quickly, my heart pounding, but there was nothing there. I stood still, straining my ears, trying to catch any sound that might betray the presence of something, or someone else. But there was only silence. I told myself it was just an animal, a deer or a fox, something harmless. But the feeling of being watched grew stronger, more insistent. I took a few more steps, my eyes scanning the undergrowth, the shadows. And then I saw it again. A brief glimpse of movement, something dark and swift, darting between the trees. This time, I didn't wait to see what it was. My fear, which had been a low, simmering presence in the back of my mind, flared into full-blown panic. I turned and began to walk back the way I had come, trying to keep my pace steady, to not break into a run. I could feel my heart racing, the adrenaline surging through my veins. The woods seemed to close in around me, the trees looming larger, the shadows deeper. Every rustle, every snap of a twig sent a jolt of fear through me. I quickened my pace, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. I could feel eyes on me, unseen but unmistakable. By the time I reached the edge of the woods, I was nearly running. I burst out into the open field, the sunlight blinding after the dimness of the forest. I turned, looking back into the shadows, but saw nothing. Just the trees, standing silent and unmoving, as if they had never harbored anything sinister. I stood there for a long moment, catching my breath, trying to calm the pounding of my heart. The fear of the woods was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. A sense of curiosity, of needing to know what I had seen, what had followed me. The safety of the open fields lay ahead, a stark contrast to the oppressive darkness I had just escaped. But as I stepped into the tall grass, a new kind of fear gripped me, an instinctive, primal terror. The air felt different here, heavier, charged with an unspoken threat. I moved quickly, hoping the vast openness would soothe my nerves. The sky above was clear, but the ground beneath my feet seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Every rustle of grass, every distant chirp of an insect felt amplified, distorted. Halfway across the field, I saw it again. The dark shape from the woods. It was closer now, clearer, a figure standing perfectly still among the swaying grasses. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The figure seemed to be watching me, its presence an inescapable anchor of dread. I forced myself to move, each step feeling like a battle against an unseen force. My eyes darted around, searching for any sign of normalcy, but the fields felt empty, desolate. The figure remained motionless, a silent sentinel in the gathering gloom. As I neared the center of the field, the figure began to move. Slowly, deliberately, it took a step toward me. I felt a surge of panic, my survival instinct screaming at me to run, but my legs felt heavy, my movements sluggish. The figure took another step, then another, its dark form becoming more defined. It was tall, with unnaturally long limbs that moved with a disturbing fluidity. Its eyes, if they could be called eyes, glowed faintly, pinpricks of malevolent light in the encroaching darkness. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering in my chest. I turned to run, but the grass seemed to close in around me, the tall stalks tangling around my legs, slowing my progress. I could hear my own ragged breathing, the pounding of my heart echoing in my ears. The figure was getting closer, its steps slow but unrelenting. I tripped, falling hard onto the ground. The impact knocked the wind out of me, but I scrambled to my feet, glancing back over my shoulder. The figure was almost upon me, its outstretched hand reaching for me with fingers like twisted branches. I ran with everything I had, the landscape around me blurring into a haze of fear and desperation. The field, once a place of solace, had transformed into a labyrinth of terror. I could feel the figure's presence behind me, an ever-looming shadow that pressed down on my mind. Finally, I burst through the tall grass, reaching the far edge of the field. I didn't stop running until I was sure I had put as much distance between myself and that malevolent presence as possible. When I finally dared to look back, the field was empty, but I knew the figure was still out there, watching, waiting. I don't know how long I stood there at the edge of the field, my body trembling with exhaustion and fear. The sun had set completely, and the darkness around me was thick and oppressive. I had escaped the immediate threat, but I knew it wasn't over. Whatever had followed me from the woods into the fields was still out there, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike again. I took a few cautious steps forward, glancing around nervously. The fields stretched out before me, a vast, empty expanse that now felt like a trap. I had to get out of there, to find some place where I could feel safe again. But every time I moved, the grass seemed to whisper around me, as if trying to warn me of the danger that still lurked nearby. Suddenly, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold, a soft, rustling noise coming from behind me. I turned slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure was back, emerging from the shadows with that same deliberate, menacing stride. Its glowing eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a wave of terror wash over me. I ran. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, my feet pounding against the ground, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The landscape around me blurred into a nightmarish haze of darkness and fear. I could hear the figure behind me, its footsteps echoing in the silence, growing closer with each passing second. The grass seemed to clutch at my legs, trying to slow me down, but I pushed through, fueled by sheer panic. I could feel the figure's presence, a cold, suffocating weight that pressed down on my mind. My vision narrowed, and I could barely see where I was going, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Suddenly, I stumbled, my foot catching on something hidden in the grass. I fell hard, my hands scraping against the rough ground. Pain shot through me, but I scrambled to my feet, glancing back over my shoulder. The figure was almost upon me, its outstretched hand reaching for me with those twisted, branch-like fingers. Desperation surged through me, and I pushed myself harder, my muscles burning with the effort. I could see the edge of the field ahead, a line of trees that marked the boundary between the open expanse and the safety of the forest. I knew I had to reach it, to put as much distance between myself and the figure as possible. The trees loomed closer, and I felt a glimmer of hope. But just as I reached the edge of the field, I felt something cold and clammy wrap around my ankle. I looked down and saw one of the figure's hands, its fingers digging into my flesh with an iron grip. A scream tore from my throat as I struggled to free myself, kicking and thrashing with all my strength. Somehow, I managed to break free, stumbling forward into the trees. I didn't stop running until I was deep within the forest, the darkness closing in around me. Only then did I collapse to the ground, my body shaking with sobs of relief and terror. I was safe. For now. But the fear didn't leave me. Even as I lay there, gasping for breath, I could feel the figure's eyes on me, could hear the faint rustle of grass that signaled its approach. I knew it would never stop, that it would follow me wherever I went, a relentless shadow that haunted my every step. The open fields, once a place of freedom and safety, had become a landscape of terror. I couldn't bear the thought of crossing them again, of feeling that cold, clammy grip on my ankle, of seeing those glowing eyes watching me from the darkness. The fields had taken on a new, nightmarish quality, a place where fear ruled and safety was an illusion. I knew I couldn't stay in the forest forever. Eventually, I would have to find a way out, to cross the fields once more. But the thought of doing so filled me with a paralyzing dread. The fields had become my prison, a place where the shadows moved and the night never ended. And somewhere out there, in the vast, open expanse, the figure waited, biding its time, ready to emerge from the darkness and claim me once more. I was trapped in an endless nightmare, and there was no escape.